The Flushing girl from Flushing, the nanny named Fran.
Oh, Mr. Sheffield.
Miss Fine.
Hello and welcome to Oh, Mr. Sheffield, a podcast about the nanny, the TV show, not your nanny who raised you growing up. I am Sean DiPasquale here with my co-host Toria Sheffield.
Hello. I really mix up my hellos sometimes, and I wonder if people feel like that's indicative of my mood.
I do, and I am constantly lost in the first 5 minutes of the episode, figuring out if you're happy to be here or not. This episode is episode 17 of season 1 of The Nanny. Stop the Wedding, I Want to Get Off, which is a parody, another parody title. This one, I believe it's what is the Stop the World, I Want to Get Off is the phrase. I think it's a song, actually. I did no research. I'm not prepared. This episode, did you?
I did some research. I'll say this. We usually do 3 episodes a day, and that's why you guys might notice some episodes we come in hot and heavy on the research, and then some episodes it's like, I think I kind of remember what happened, and that's usually when we're on the 3rd episode. But
that's for the corrections part of the show next week, though. It's a built-in feature.
Okay, but I just looked it up. The internet means we can slack a third of the time because of the internet. So, Stop the World, I Want to Get Off is a musical.
I knew it.
By Anthony Newley and Leslie Brickus.
Yeah.
I'm probably saying that wrong. I don't know anything else about it, but it is a musical, and that makes sense that this show often does musical puns for their titles. So check that out.
And directed by Gail Mancuso and written by Diane Wilk. Good episode. This is the one where Mr. Sheffield's sister comes to town, and she's going to get married, but maybe not to who we think.
Yes, and so the interesting, it's funny that you said that. You didn't do a lot of research, because when I was doing my second little viewing before we recorded to refresh my memory, I actually did do some random research into the actors. And I found out that this episode gets more interesting when you know who's playing people, because Mr. Sheffield's sister is played by Twiggy, the famous English model.
Really?
Have you heard of Twiggy?
Yeah, but I didn't know what she looked like or who she was, but I've heard the name, yeah.
Yes, she was a 60s sort of mod girl, and she really was famous for bringing in something that probably has caused a lot of damage to women in retrospect, which was the Twiggy model thin look. And she kind of like brought in that wave of that being like what teen girls on magazine covers looked like. And she also is Fran Drescher's real life friend. Twiggy was actually the friend she was going to go visit when she ended up sitting on that plane next to the big president of the network. And she was hanging out with Twiggy and Twiggy's kids when she had the idea for like a culture clash where I'm the nanny.
Wow. That is wild. What a small world. Yeah, that's crazy.
So the sister shows up for this visit, and she has this fiance in tow who is the Duke of Salisbury, and she also has her loyal driver of 20 years, Lester, sort of like a manservant type. And I thought this episode was interesting that it went right after the last episode we saw, because last week we get this taste of Fran's home life and her backstory and what her childhood was like. And this week we get a taste of what Mr. Sheffield's childhood was like, and
which we've only really previously known from when we met his nanny, played by Cloris Leachman a bunch of episodes back.
Yeah,
where we learned that he was like coddled in like a very bizarre way.
Well, we were reminded sort of how upper class he is, and that this like sort of felt like an episode of The Crown, and how they were, he and his sister comes in and she's instantly like, "Pip pip and he's like, da, 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 and they have this very like back and forth, very specific banter and inside jokes, but it's very British. And at one point, one of them makes a joke and they both laugh, and Fran just goes, "Meh, I never got Benny Hill either," which made me laugh. But the one thing that was interesting to me about this also was, so when I found out that Twiggy was playing his sister Jocelyn, and then as soon as I heard the driver speak, I was like, oh my God, that is my father's accent. Like that sounds exactly like him. And
oh my God, was it your dad?
And then I realized my father was in this episode and that he was an actor before he was a professional living in Washington, D.C.
Wow.
But no, what I actually thought was, I was like, you know what? I was like, I almost never hear that accent on TV. And I had to look it up. That actor is from Atherstone, which is a 2-hour drive from where my father was from in the north of England. And it's a specific accent. And again, not Americans don't hear it that often. And it's different than what Twiggy's was. And then I also had to Google who played the Duke. And this guy looked just like Colin Firth, but he was actually an American actor from Georgia putting on this very upper crust English accent.
That's pretty crazy. He sounded very British. Wow.
He did. Well, I mean, he sounded British to like the American ear of like what a fancy British person sounds like. I don't know. Actually, he was like, darling.
Yeah. So, that sounds British. That's how British people
yes. And, they're very understated in their romance. And it's the kind of thing where it's like they're all having dinner and, Fran says something like, when did you know she was the one? And he was like, I looked at her and I realized this is quite nice. And, and Twiggy said, Jocelyn says something like, and I looked at him and thought, he seems like a stable friend. And it's clear that it's like very passionless, but very stable. And, Fran's like, well, do you have a date? And they kind of are saying that like they want to get married soon, but they're doing all this traveling. And she's like, well, I used to be a wedding planner. Like you should just get married here this Sunday and I will get everything all in order for you. And they look at each other in this like very like reserved way. And they're like, shall we, darling? And it's like, might as well. And so that sets up the premise of the episode that Fran is going to plan Mr. Sheffield's sister's wedding to this Duke. Yeah. Also in this scene, did you clock the bulimia joke that you could not do? You could not do.
Yeah. Boy, did I clock
it. Baby. So they're eating steak and kidney pies because that's Jocelyn's favorite. And after dinner, Fran, says to Niles, like, ugh, Niles, you can table this recipe. Like, did not enjoy this. And he goes, well, Miss Fine, like it's steak and kidney pie is Lady Di's favorite. And then Fran goes, no wonder she's always throwing up. Which, like, first of all, I was like, this joke does not work now on so many levels. Not only because Princess Diana died tragically. Yeah. But because, like, bulimia is no longer a punchline.
Because it's not a joke anymore.
It's not a joke.
Used to be hilarious. Now it's not a joke.
Yes. But I was like, wow.
Yeah, I wrote that down. There's also... I do want to point out that Fran's first outfit in this episode is maybe my favorite thing she's ever worn. It's like that weird outfit with all the writing all over it, and it just says like Euro trash.
Honestly, I was like, I would wear that today. It was so cool.
Yeah, it was
like
awesome.
pink. It was very retro in its cut. It was a pink, like sort of blazer and like sort of I don't know how to talk about fashion. I'm the worst. We need a third party opinion on this, but it was very retro. It was bubblegum pink and it had like newspaper print writing all over it.
But it was like, it looked cool. Like it genuinely looked cool. A lot of times when they go for like big outfits with her, I feel like it's goofy, but this one, even though it was trying to be kind of goofy, like I was like, oh man, she looks cool. That's like a cool outfit.
No, if I had that, like, it would legit be my favorite thing that I would wear to try to be a cool hip girl.
Yeah, exactly.
We're not trying to be Toria the cool girl.
I feel like when you say that, you throw your thumbs up near your like shoulders.
If I'm the cool girl and I try to kick a jukebox.
And then break your toe.
The emotional crux of this episode, or like the catalyst of the conflict of this episode, is it quickly becomes apparent to Fran that Jocelyn is not really in love with the Duke. she clearly has been in love with her driver, Lester, for years. And Lester has clearly been in love with her. And it's sort of, it happens in this very sweet moment where I think Fran is like asking the Duke, she's like, well, I'm trying to get things ready for the wedding. So like, what's her favorite flower? What's her favorite food? Like, what's her favorite such and such? And the Duke really doesn't know. And then she, goes over to the driver once the Duke has left. And she's like, do you happen to know this stuff? And he knows it like right off the top of his head. He's like, roses, Chardonnay, and like her favorite color is like, a verdant green or something like that, like so specific. And it just dawns on Fran like, oh my God, she's marrying the wrong man. And she gets to meddling. Like she feels like she wants to remedy this situation.
Yep. And then we get so she starts planning. She's already started planning the wedding, and she brings back. We get what's that kid's name? Benny.
Kenny.
Kenny. Kenny returns to do funny jokes, and he's great. He walks in and he immediately makes a Beverly Hillbillies reference, which I thought was really solid. About that them living in a mansion, and he feels nervous about being there because he feels like he won't like hold up to like what Grace's or what Maggie's expectations are going to be for like a man, because he's just like a blue collar Jewish kid, who's almost 30 years old. And that leads to what I think might be the darkest joke that we've ever heard on this show. But I think I'm going to save it for when we get to favorite lines, because it's by far my favorite line in the show. But I'll tee that up now. It was a very dark joke. And then we get the reveal that Jocelyn is definitely shtipping the driver. And
no, they're not. They've never done it before. No.
Well, they've got an affair. They're having an emotional affair. Yes.
I know they've never admitted this to each other before. It's been a quiet, British, reserved. It's like been a remains of the day love. I don't know if you ever read that book or saw that movie. It's heartbreaking.
I saw that movie.
Heartbreaking. Yeah. Anthony Hopkins and Emma Thompson. It's the love that dare not speak its name. It goes unsaid because it's inappropriate, but under the surface love between them for 20 years. That's what I thought.
Oh, I guess you're right. Like
they've never acknowledged
you're totally
it.
Right.
Yeah, they've never acknowledged it to not only each other, but to themselves until Fran pushes it to happen. Because basically she tries to get Mr. Sheffield to call off the wedding. And he's like, why? What's happening? And she's like, Jocelyn is in love with Lester and Lester's in love with Jocelyn. And he's like, oh my God, she told you? And she's like, no, but I'm pretty sure. And he's like, oh, okay. So you literally want me to call everything off because you have a hunch. And she like doesn't understand he's being sarcastic. And she's like, I knew you'd understand. But so instead, and so she promises she's not going to meddle between the Duke and Jocelyn, but she like didn't promise anything about Lester. So she ends up going to Lester, convincing him to like, declare his love. And literally moments before the wedding is about to take place in the Sheffield's living room, Lester takes her aside and they share a kiss. But it's this thing where he's sort of like, I have nothing to offer you. I'm just a driver and I'm the help. And it's one of those situations. And I actually have a note. My grandmother called off an engagement for that exact same reason. My English grandmother. Because
she fell in love with her chauffeur?
Opposite. My grandmother, a very wealthy heir. My family in England was very poor. And Charlie Chivers, who was heir to the Chivers Jam.
Wait, is this a true story? This sounds like, and also were you just about to say the heir to the Chivers Jam fortune? Okay, so this is not a real story. This takes place in like Hobbit Town. No. In Harry Potter land.
No. Charlie Chivers fell in love with my grandmother. And he wanted to marry her. And she said, no, it would never work because I work in the factories and your family owns the factories and your mother would never accept me. And the story goes that he was such a classy guy that when she married my grandfather,
He
Charles
killed himself.
No.
He jumped into a bottomless pit of jam.
When she married my grandfather, he sent them a beautiful wedding gift, which my jealous, angry, poor grandfather, poor as in actually financially poor, threw across a room and broke. Because he would not have a gift from Charlie Chivers in their home.
And it exploded with jam. The end.
And that, she would talk about it all the time, how, she used to work in the factories. And so her fingernails were always dirty, which is why she always wore gloves when she would go out dancing. And that's where she met Charlie Chivers. And it was the whole family lore.
Damn, what a number.
But when I saw this, it really is true to this culture.
What did your grandma look like? Did she look like Audrey Hepburn?
Audrey Hepburn. No, she looked like a little blonde flapper. She was 5'2". She was born in 1902, so she came of age in the 20s. But yeah, so these are stories that I grew up with. You did not marry above or below your station, and you really could. It really wasn't just a plot device. It was something that could keep two people apart.
Interrompemos esse podcast para perguntar: quem você quer ser?
Designer, engenheira, pedagoga,
administrador.
Quer saber? O Senac EAD é nota máxima no MEC. Tem cursos de diversas áreas, com conteúdo elaborado por especialistas do mercado e professores mestres e doutores. Ainda tem o Senac Carreiras, conectando estudantes a vagas de emprego em todo o país. Saiba mais em ead.senac.br/graduação.
But so they end up kissing and it gets discovered, and then it ends in this very British way where, the Duke walks in and he said in a very British way, he's like, I'm heartbroken, and just leaves with dignity.
First, Fran has a line where she's like, I don't understand, this doesn't bother you at all. And then he turns, because he's got a very dry British reaction to it all. And then he turns to Fran and he goes, how dare you? I'm heartbroken.
Yes. And Mr. Sheffield is like, don't you have any compassion, Miss Fine? Because all the British people in the room, they can see how racked with anguish he is. Yeah.
But his expression literally doesn't change. It's great.
Yeah. Yeah, it was great. And then he sees himself out, and then, the very convenient bow at the end is they're like, well, everything's already set up for a wedding. Let's do this. So Jocelyn and her driver get married. Yeah. And the last scene of the episode, it's very sweet and earnest, and also I would say bittersweet, because it's Fran and Mr. Sheffield sort of cleaning up the kitchen after this really big day, and they're sort of rehashing the events of the last few days. And, Mr. Sheffield goes, can you imagine being blind to the fact that you love someone just because they work for you? And there's a moment between them, a kind of loaded moment. And then they just go on their separate ways as Fran is tossing the bouquet that she caught earlier in the day.
Yeah, and they sell it pretty hard. Mr. Sheffield, even as he's leaving, sort of stops and glances back at her. And then leaves, and then she glances back at him after he's already left, not seeing that he stopped and glanced back at her. And then, he goes out and she goes upstairs, and yeah, it's really sweet. And I mean, I think, we're on episode 17 of, I think, 22 or 24. So they're definitely, not at this point, it's not a question of if, but when, Mm-hmm. And they're starting to lean into that more. Yeah, I thought it was a sweet episode. It was not as funny to me as the previous episode. There was a lot of comedy baked into that premise. But there were a couple of, I love when the Duke of Salisbury first enters and Fran goes, oh my God, I love your steaks.
Yes. Well, wait, should we transition into segments?
Yes.
If we're going to get into our favorites?
No, we should. You're right. Let's do segments. And now, segments.
So, segments.
Yeah, no, I think we should move on to segments.
We can move on to our segments.
And now, segments.
Segments with Sean and Toria.
Okay, so favorite lines?
Well, I went over, I realized left something really funny out of a line that I already mentioned, which is Cece goes, I didn't know Maxwell had a sister. Niall says, well, now you know what you're worth to him. And then a few beats later, when she goes, well, why did Franny Fine know about her? Niles goes, he talks in his sleep. And I'm just like, zing, dang, like no mercy for Cece.
No mercy. It's not even true because they haven't slept together yet, but it's great. He's a jerk.
Yeah, he's just being a total jerk to her and playing on her worst fears and insecurities.
Yeah. Well, and then my favorite line, which I also think is the darkest, is when Kenny leaves the first time. Maggie comes downstairs and she's like, "Where?" And and Fran's like, "Oh, Kenny was just here, but he had to go." And then she goes, "Well, why did he leave?" And she goes, "Oh, I don't know. I think all the leather boots scared him off. It's a Jewish thing," which I'm pretty sure is a Holocaust joke.
It's a Nazi. It's a Nazi joke for sure. It's a Nazi joke because yes, what Maggie was wearing like leather riding boots or something.
Yeah. And I just was like, boy, oh boy, what a dark joke. But
yeah,
I loved it. So, you know.
It's funny because one of my favorite jokes was also a Kenny moment. Maybe he's going to be a sneak attack, bigger character because maybe they really liked him. Because you could tell they really like him because of the amount of airtime they've already been giving him. But basically, later in the episode, he's back in the mix and he invites Maggie to come see him perform at some like hole in the wall place. And she's like, I'd love to. And he goes, really? I think I've just lost all respect for you, which is such a like neurotic, hilarious thing of like, you really, really like someone until they actually like you back. And then you think there must be something wrong with them. It's like such a self-hating, neurotic.
Oh, I've done that. I've done that all the way up until my most recent relationship. So I can't tell you how many people I may have completely missed out on because I was like, well, if they're into me, then there must be something wrong. I'll go chase after a girl that has no interest in me at all.
Classic Kenny, classic all of us, I guess. Well, not all of us, just us damaged people.
Damaged goods.
Damaged goods, baby.
We should save that for our other podcast, Damaged Goods, the therapy podcast.
Yeah, where we also just talk about all the clothes we've ruined by not properly taking care of them because, God, that's my life. I have so many stains on all my clothes.
Yeah, and each episode ends with a segment on how to properly pack large items for shipping so that they don't arrive as damaged goods.
I feel like I have like a learned ignorance, and I think it must just be our generation. It's our generation for the worst. All right, so nanny trivia. This is short and sweet. In real life, Fran Drescher has an older sister named Nadine, just like she does on the show. And we have not yet met Nadine, but we met Mr. Sheffield's sister, Jocelyn. So I figured we'd throw a little Fran's sister trivia in there. And her parents, as we've said before, are also named after her real life parents. Sylvia, Morty, and Nadine is her nuclear family in real life.
Adorable. I hope we get to meet her sister at some point in future episodes.
Oh, yeah, we do. I forget who someone plays her who's interesting.
Jane Fonda.
Really? No.
No, no.
No, I was like, what? And for the Yiddish, I forgot. So there wasn't actually Yiddish in this, but they say there's a line where Fran goes, Mazel Tov. It's Yiddish for pip pip. Yes. Which I thought was funny because first of all, pip pip is so stupid, and sometimes the British aristocracy sounds so stupid. Yeah. When you actually listen to them talking.
Is there a definition for pip pip? Like, does it mean anything, or is it just?
I think it's like hip hip hooray. It's just short for let me see, pip pip meaning.
Did you grow up with a British accent and then had to lose it, or did you always have an American accent?
No. I always had an American accent, but there were a few little things that as I got to school, I found out that like other kids said it differently just as I grew up with my dad. I think this also says pip pip is farewell. Maybe it's pip pip cheerio is what you're saying. The only thing that I still say that people call me out on, and for a long time I didn't realize it was because of growing up with an English parent. I often say, I might even be saying it wrong, like bedroom. Like I say the room part a little differently than other people. And
but what's funny about that is when I when I hear you say that, it always sounds Canadian to me. It comes off as very Canadian to me.
Bedroom.
Yeah, bedroom.
It's not, I guess people say room. Like to me.
Yeah, you say it like red rum, like in The Shining, like red rum, red rum. But that is spelled R-U-M, not R-O-O-M.
And how do you say it? Say it. Let me hear
Room.
Room. Like that's hard for me.
Like broom. Do you say sweep with a broom? You say sweep with a broom.
Sweep with a broom. Sweep with a broom. This
bedroom.
Is also riveting for our listeners.
It's listen, as we preface, this is the third episode of the record this week, so you get what you get. You don't get upset, as I used to say. We're trying to give you a full 30 minutes of quality content, and you'll get 24 minutes of quality content and 6 minutes of questionably entertaining nonsense. And that's a Mr. Sheffield promise.
And then, okay, for the Fran or the Cece, I really think I'm the Fran, and because I really love meddling and I'm really nosy and I really have had to try to get better at it. And I think you generally don't give a shit. That might be a stereotypically gender divide, but I know that, for example, this happened kind of recently. So when I was talking to you and Tom over our Slack, which we're on all day talking to each other, I mentioned my boyfriend and you both were like, who? And I'm like, my boyfriend of 2 years. And I feel like I could tell you your girlfriend's and wives favorite colors. And I was just
look, here's what I'll say about that. I feel like specifically in that scenario, Tom and I both agreed that you don't often talk about your boyfriend, especially as your boyfriend, which is a very for the very long time, you were just seeing a guy. And I think there was a leap between seeing a guy and oh, my boyfriend, that we both were like, oh yeah, I guess she's been seeing the same guy.
Okay, that's fair.
But you're also not wrong. Elizabeth will often, I find everything Elizabeth says, I love everything she talks about. She's a brilliant person. Every once in a while, she will talk about the intergoings on of the people on her mock trial team. And it's really tough for me to, and I've talked to her about, it's so hard for me to pay attention because I don't care about any of these people. I don't know any of these people. I'm and not for nothing, but I know you well enough to know that after this is all over, you will never talk to or about these people ever again. So it gets really hard for me to keep track of it from what, not hard to listen in the moment, but then she'll be remember a couple weeks ago I was telling you about blah, blah, blah. And I'm no, dude. I mean, vaguely, yes, but sure.
So, and I recently had this conversation with Kyle. I was I could never have met some people. I could never even have the chance of meeting them. But if you're telling me something about their personal life, I will have questions and I will want to know more. If Liz was oh yeah, this guy I go to school with, he's in this marriage and it's failing because of blah, 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 blah. I'll be well, have they been going to counseling? What are you what? And also I am trying to get better at this. I used to try to, I think, if there's two people having a problem, even if they were just friends, I would try to insert myself and mediate and make it better. And sometimes I'd make it worse. Sometimes I'd make it better. But the older I get, I'm I don't need to take that on. But I don't think you would ever.
No, I wouldn't. So you're definitely the Fran and I'm the Cece. And that makes sense, but I do wonder, I guess if you, for people listening, what do you think? Do you think that's a gender divide thing or is that too much of a generalization? Anyway, we got way off topic, but
we got way off.
Yes,
we got way off. We're trying to keep it tight and right. And we're keeping it wrong and strong.
Hey, but good news. We've hit that 32-minute mark. So ladies and gentlemen, this was an episode of Oh, Mr. Sheffield, the podcast about the nanny. I am Shadi Pasquale and you can find me at Sean Wrights. Toria, where can people find you?
Toria Sheffy, 2 F's and a Y on Instagram because I still cannot figure out how to get back into Twitter.
That's the end of the podcast. So thank you and goodbye.
And goodbye and good luck and good night.
The Flushing girl from Flushing, the nanny named Fran.
Oh, Mr. Sheffield.
Miss Fine.